Howdy, everybody. Happy Thursday. So, I'm just going to get right into this here pretty quick. Been kind of a weird week. I've been a little bit out of it. So, I'm going to kind of jump into this. I'm a little bit behind on absorbing some of this because I was preoccupied with other things. I was trying to keep some internet chatter down. But this one caught my attention today, and it was a little bit quieter. So, I was kind of listening to this while I worked in bits and pieces, a minute at a time or so. And well, let's just put it up on screen, I guess. Here it is. So it is. I don't know if I'm hearable right now or, how the volume is at this point. Hearable. That doesn't look like there's too much going on. Anyway, I kind of missed this one when he did this, and it looks like it was 3 days ago. So this Monday one or whatever, it seems like the kind of stream somebody would have put together after having a bad night. Maybe. So this one's pretty straightforward. Doug has this thing where, these are the 41 questions. If he could sit Donald Trump and Kamala Harris down in a room and give them a dosage of truth serum, these are the questions that he'd ask. When we get into this, there's two things I would like the audience to keep in mind, the live audience, and, of course, anyone who watches this after the fact. Listen for pay attention to whether or not any of the stuff that he's asking has anything to do with policy, like some kind of realistic government policy, and if it did, is it even a realistic, federal policy kind of thing? And then the other would be, there's 41 of these questions, and from the ones that I heard, the bulk of them were loaded. And I don't mean like fun loaded, like, shots, on a Saturday night kind of loaded. I'm talking just, they're wormy, questions. So we're going to jump into this here. I'm going to say hello to a few people. Aaron is here. Good to see you. Piney Boy is certainly down to sandwich board plaster with more instances of look at me than a Me6 box could safely spawn. He's kind of doing that, yeah. Nicole Wilson is here. Good to see you. PC's here. Thank you for that, PC. Good to see you. Aran Gabor. And let's see. Wraith Knight is here. Good to see you as well. Thank you for these reminders, Pragmatic. All right. So without further ado, let's just get into this and see what he's doing. I've pushed ahead into this video. So and we're just going to play him here and then see where we get. I do want to apologize to a few people. I may not be able to highlight. I changed the terms on my particular streaming service, and for whatever reason, every time I've done a live stream since then, basically what I did was I quit paying them, which I'm still paid up until I think the end of September, and then I switch over to a free service or whatever. But since that happened, every stream that I've done has had some kind of glitch. And it looks like this glitch is I'm not getting the live stream in StreamYard. I think that's kind of interesting. I've never had these issues before, but I pulled my per month fee on them because I'm switching over to a different software, still working on that. But I've been using this in the meantime, and they apparently are quite passive aggressive about it. So if I'm not highlighting as many of your comments, it's not me, it's StreamYard. I would, but I can't actually highlight them from here because they're not popping up. Let's see if I can get that to reload without ending the stream. Okay, that's starting to do it. All right. I hope that holds. Let's see. Pat Lowenger's here. Do I watch any other channel other than PineCreek? I don't see him spending this much time on my channel. Should I feel slighted? Well, if I was spending that much time on your channel, I'd probably... To be fair, I don't spend a lot of time watching PineCreek. I usually hear about something and then follow on after. Usually what ends up getting me... I got to hand it to him. He makes the shorts. The shorts are usually made out of like one of his longer streams. I'll watch that and maybe dig into the original source a little bit and watch maybe 10, 15 minutes. That's about as much as I actually watch. I do try to watch your stuff, Pat, as much as I can. Your stuff on TikTok is quite soothing. I find it relaxing. So let's see here. Let's say hello to a few people that I missed probably. These randomly timed streams are really keeping us on our toes. I do something scheduled, but every time I turn around, my schedule's changing. So, and I don't mean like my work schedule, just different things hanging around it. So, yeah. That in this time of year, this is when I start getting even more temperamental. So I'll start doing these at even weirder times. I'm not saying that as a warning, but I guess you can take it however you wish. I'm actually overdue for my 1 month disappearing act. All right, so let's see if we can get into this now. Looks like the comments are coming through, so throw those up as you will. I'll highlight them as I can. Good evening, Fabio. Thanks again for that. He sent me a link earlier today. It was pretty good. We're talking about the deficits that Trump would ring up versus Harris. Harris would also ring up some deficits too, but okay. Let's just try and get into this and let's get back into the actual video here. Let's see. Okay, 41 questions Doug would ask the candidates.
So I became a citizen February 2023, I think it was. So this is my first time voting. I've already voted for some other things already. But for the federal election, definitely first time. If I were alone, the movie Kill Bill 2, where the last scene, well, near, close to the end, Bill shoots, what's her name? Denise? No, Bernice. Bernice shoots Bernice in the leg with a truth serum. So imagine in this pretend world, you have Trump alone in a room, or you have Harris alone in a room, or you have them alone in two separate rooms, and you can shoot them with a dart, not just for the truth serum.
Truth serum is a little bit tricky. I mean,
FBI, CIA, don't come after me. I'm talking about truth serums here. Shoot them in the leg with the truth serum. And so they can't dodge any questions.
I was going to say something, but I was going to get that pedantic on him. But you do you, Michael. Good to see you.
Question. And they can only tell you the truth or their beliefs about the truth as they see it.
It lowers their inhibitions. As far as I understand, you can still be deceptive while under the influence of sodium pentothal, I think is the most common one. That's probably really old school.
What would you ask them? So I started coming up, I thought it would be like 10 questions. I started writing them down, and I just couldn't.
Join forces against theism? Actually, no. If you mean me and Doug, no, probably not. Doug actually made a short a year or two ago where he was sort of telling like the LGBT community, LGBTQ individuals who were Christian, who were believers, that they should either just deal with the fact that they're uncomfortable being in the Christian faith, and Christianity thinks that their life is sinful and they're destined for hell, or abandon their religion. But they've only got those two choices. And I didn't agree with that because he kind of like put it on the LGBTQ Christians that they were cherry picking the gospels for meaning, and somehow the fundamentalists weren't. Like it just didn't occur to him that the other side was doing that. So I wouldn't unite. I don't really have anything against theism. I'm not a theist. My issue, if somebody's inclined to think that there's a creator being, okay. If they think that they're in conversation with it and it has a master plan for how it would like them to run my life and other people's lives by its say so, that's when I start demanding things, simple things like proof and stuff. I just think that's fair.
Couldn't stop. I'm up to 4 pages. But they're short 1-sentence type questions, which most people can't do. They can't ask. They go blah 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 blah.
I feel like he's talking to me.
No, that's not the way to ask a question. So imagine this. So I want you to listen to my questions, and I might conjure up some questions of your own. And be fair, like ask questions to both. I am a conservative, so most of my questions are for Harris, but I do have some here for Trump.
Very few, if I remember correctly. Then again, this was just background noise for a while. I can never tell how serious Doug is being. That's, I think, on purpose. But I think at this one, I think these ones are serious, and there's a tell. I'll leave it for you guys to tell what the tell is. Just you take my word for it. There is a tell when he's being serious. He makes this obvious thing. Too much is the answer, unfortunately. I think Fabio's right. Good to see you, Joe. The orange blob could lie under truth serum and pass a lie detector. It's in his DNA. I mean, he hates the effect of alcohol, so I am kind of curious to see what he would do under the influence of a truth serum. Like, I mean, the guy already is like a stream of consciousness, BS machine. You put the dime in, you got to wait for the song to play kind of situation. And like, why would you put sodium pentothal in that blob? Like, a tub of guts is just not going to stop talking. And it was hard enough to get him to stop talking before.
And in random order, this is not in importance. Beatrix. What did I say? Beatrice? No, it's Beatrix. You're right. Beatrix Kiddo had to tell the truth. So if Harris and Trump had to tell the truth, I mean, there's a ton of questions.
Keep this in mind, right? He's setting this up. He's doing a good job of setting this up, right? Like this sodium pentothal induced state for both Kamala Harris and Donald Trump somehow. They have to tell the truth. I mean, just suspend your disbelief there, but that's the situation. They have to. So you've got these people in a suggestible state, in an uninhibited state. Watch out for Donald Trump. And we'll see.
Questions you could ask them. So this is in random order. This would be for Harris. Will you admit, Harris, that abortion being a right nationally probably won't ever happen again for decades, if at all?
Notice anything wrong with the question? Will you admit? If you answer yes, you'll admit that that's the case, but you haven't been talking about it forthcomingly. If you say no, you refuse to admit that that's the case, even though it could be the case. I don't know if Doug knows, like a telltale sign of a stupid question is when somebody words it in such a way that it's loaded, and that no matter if you demand, I want a yes or no answer from you, both yes and no indict them.
Harris, will you admit the best way to prevent abortion is to have sex, but not vaginal sex, which is in the control of the individual?
Did you hear that one? Michael, will you admit you can refuse? Exactly. JL says, off topic, but do you think the September debate will happen? For the sake of us having a show together, I hope so. I'm really kind of having my doubts. I really don't know that it will happen. I think if this campaign, the two people that run his campaign, well, I think are not ethical totally, are not dumb and plenty politically savvy. They can pick up a vibe pretty quick. So I think if they can't turn it around, if it just makes him look boring, then he's done. If they get desperate, they'll do it. It'll be a Hail Mary pass just to see if it's sort of like, they're going to have to hope that Harris like falls on her face completely during that. And I think even if she fell on her face a little bit, maybe just bounced off the floor and jumped right back up again, probably still not out of the running. I mean, the debates aren't really, I don't think, going to change too much. And the dynamics around the Biden-Trump debate led to something very, very different beyond the debate. A lot of people, debates just don't matter. Like, well, normally they don't, but they did in that case. Exactly, Fabio. He can't be that stupid. He can, and he's doing it in his native language too. Yeah. But this one, I'm just going to rewind this one.
Harris, will you admit the best way to prevent abortion is to have sex, but not vaginal sex?
Why does she need to admit to that? One. Two, what kind of abortions are you talking about? If you're just talking about elective abortions where a woman's going in because she got pregnant either because of failure of birth control or a mistake or something, any number of things, it's an elective abortion. Maybe that would reduce that. Yeah, if you can get the population to quit putting penises inside of vaginas and performing the reproductive act, you could decrease the number of inadvertent pregnancies and therefore concomitantly reduce the number of abortions either desired or sought. So what? Is he looking for a policy decision? Will you admit that that's all that happens? And why don't you, as president, come out against vaginal intercourse once and for all? Why can't we get a president who stands up against vaginal intercourse?
Which is in the control of the individual.
So because it's in the control of the individual, is Doug reading Reason magazine or something? Has he gotten some subscriptions that we should know about?
I got to. Again, this is random order.
Is this best? Yeah, exactly. Like, well, that's the best way to reduce abortions. Well, you know what? The best way to reduce abortions would be comprehensive sex ed and a national health care plan that makes sure women get all the health care that they need, since they're the ones that usually take responsibility for the birth control that's out there, including condoms, guys. That might be the stupidest question ever asked. This is something, it's like something out of a fantasy thing. I expected to hear that out of like a King of the Hill show or like one of the crazy people in an episode of Parks and Recreation at one of the town councils stands up and say that when will these politicians admit that we just eliminate vaginal intercourse? We don't have to worry about inadvertent pregnancies. He's advocating for abstinence since that'll lead to less impregnation. Well, I mean, and I've never really heard him talk about this before, but I mean, it seems like he's going to do something really cynical where it's like, well, no, I'm not saying that they can't not fool around, but it just has to be, mouth and butt stuff. Somebody is obsessed with butt sex. I would appreciate it, Fabio, if you would write those kinds of comments in Italian. Sorry.
Question number 3. Harris, will you encourage increased funding for the police?
She probably would, but in a lot of cases, it's usually grants to states that increase funding to state and local police, from my understanding. But there's usually some federal funding that goes into it.
Question number 4. Harris, will you denounce the BLM riots?
Loaded. He said BLM riots. Imagine if he had said, will you denounce the BLM protests? Will you denounce the First Amendment expression of free citizens during these protests? Will you denounce that, please? Oh, no. I meant the riots that were associated with, because I've never heard him say this before. At least I don't think so. I don't know that I've recalled that. So any of the riots that occurred, even though they were peaceful protests, there was violence and arson and things like that occurred in and around some of these things, but a lot of that was kind of tangential to the core protest group. Most of them are given the message they're not to do that, they're not to engage in that thing. In fact, they're warned usually in advance there are going to be people here that are looking to draft off us, and they're going to try to provoke the cops to get the cops to attack us. They're going to loot, they're going to vandalize. It's going to happen. Ignore them. Stay on course. I wonder if Doug's aware that kind of message discipline goes out to the protesters so that they don't get too involved in and if somebody splits off, basically you're cut off. Like, no, you want to go do that, you're not part of the group. You're disowned. Get the hell out of here. If you're going to go burn down somebody's shop or something like that. So him saying, this is a loaded question. Will you denounce the BLM riots? She's going to be like, no. Were they riots? Were they BLM riots? Just because you call them that doesn't make it so. And that's a loaded question. So,
question number 5. Trump, will you denounce the January 6th riots?
I didn't think those were riots. According to Doug, he said they were no big deal. In fact, he and T-Jump were both in agreement. Oh, the January 6th thing, yeah, it'll blow over. Not a big problem.
Number 6. Harris.
And I bet you one thing, if Trump were to tell Doug that, hey, that question's loaded. January 6th wasn't a riot. Those were patriots protesting their government. I bet Doug would be a lot more sympathetic to Trump telling him that about the Jan 6 rioters than if Harris said, hey, those BLM protesters were exercising their First Amendment right to protest violent police action against people in their community. They're protesting their government. I don't think he would kindly accept that from Harris. He would call that an excuse from Harris. Is that what you say, Trump?
Will you admit that you suspected Biden was experiencing cognitive decline long before he exited the race? Can you imagine if she had to answer that honestly?
If she had to answer it honestly, what the hell is he talking about? Has she answered that dishonestly? I don't think there's been anybody out there. Like, most people have been like, it's like, as far as I'm like, look, his performance in the debate was terrible. This guy is too old and too tired to do both of these full-time jobs at the same time. He can't do it. I don't remember it ever coming up in the discussion that, like, hey, you can't do your job anymore. You need to step down immediately. That was never the argument. The argument was, look, you needed to present a contrasting message with this message coming from Trump and Trump's campaign, that you are somehow aging backward like Benjamin Button, and you will be even more invigorated and younger and have more energy when you get in for your second term. And nothing to see here, nothing to worry about. You need to do that. That's probably impossible for an 81-year-old candidate to do, especially having done this job, the presidency, for 4 years, 3.5, but still puts some miles on. So yeah, this is kind of dumb. Like, oh, if she had to answer that honestly. Doug likes to accuse other people of like, getting into conspiracies and stuff. So he believes that if he had these two candidates in a room and he had them shot full of truth serum, he could get these kinds of answers out of Harris. What if he just got like, wait, what? What?
Question number 7, Harris. Do you truly believe that the many court indictments charges against Trump would have happened if Trump promised not to run for president years ago?
Most of the indictments against Trump are things that he's done because of his involvement as president. So I'm not exactly sure of course he wouldn't be facing consequences for, say, mishandling classified documents or trying to fill, switch out, electors, the fake electors scandal, or any of these other kinds of things. They were all directly related to either his election activities or to activities that he did right after he was no longer president. The handling of the only one that's different, the only one that's kind of an outlier for that, and some of it was hands off because he was president for those 4 years, is the E. Jean Carroll case. And the reason that she was able to bring a civil suit against him was because of a law that changed in New York, the Adult Survivors of Abuse or something act or whatever that they put through, that basically removed the statute of limitations on situations like hers. So she brought charges against him in civil court, and it didn't change criminal, as far as I can tell, and it didn't lead to any kind of civil or criminal charges either. So that one is based on the fact that the law in New York State changed, and that case was filed in New York State by a resident of New York State against a resident of New York State, or part-time resident of New York State. I'm not exactly sure how that works, but that's how it occurred in New York State. The other ones that he's talking about, well, can you admit that he wouldn't be facing any of these other court cases if he hadn't been president or hadn't just agreed not to run for president? Well, if it agreed not to run for president, he wouldn't have gotten in trouble as president. Well, in this case, running for president, and then doing the election denying stuff as president. And then after, no longer being president and stepping away, but insisting he still was president, taking documents he had no business taking, and then refusing to give them back when the National Archives requested them back. So, yeah, he could have avoided a lot of this trouble had he just never been president.
The Jean Carroll case, for example, do you think that ever would have happened if Trump wouldn't have ran for president?
Again, the only reason that happened was because New York State passed a law that allowed people like E. Jean Carroll to go after their alleged attackers. That's why she pressed charges against him in a civil case. Yes, I think she would have done that, because I don't think she filed until 2022, and I think that law went into effect in 2021. Can we skip ahead to one of the questions he would ask Trump just to get a comparison? We can come back after, pretty please. He does have, they're scattered in here intermittently, but I have no idea when they pop up. It's like a raisin in oatmeal, Question for Trump: how the F did you manage to bankrupt a casino? Well, when you use it for money laundering purposes, I guess it's easier.
Not even in 2016.
Not even in 2016.
Question number 8.
In 2016, he wasn't president yet, Doug. He was running for. So did he have to promise then that they wouldn't be able to file charges against him for any of these other things if he had never been president? Like, please don't ever come after me for all the things that I do when I'm like, what is he talking about? Is he negotiating with a different group of people in a sub-universe or something? Like he's just stepping into another dimension?
Harris: if you want to get rid of taxes on tips, why not do it now?
Because they would be able to pass it now. That kind of change is going to require legislation. The president and the vice president can encourage someone in the Senate or the House to introduce legislation, but they can't just make that happen, to the best of my knowledge. That's a revenue-seeking thing, and that's usually one of those things that Congress has control over. It's like when you try to use an executive order to demand something get paid for it. You can use an executive order to change the way certain laws get enforced, but you can't use an executive order that shunts funding someplace, at least as far as I know, because usually that the power of the purse is controlled by Congress. So if you're trying to do tax reform, I don't think you want taxes being dictated by executive orders. That's going to really screw things up. So why wouldn't she do it now, or why couldn't she do it now? Those are two questions, actually, and there's good reasons for why both of them aren't going to happen. Nothing like that is going to happen until after the first of the year.
Question number 9. Harris: will you publicly denounce anti-Semitism on college campuses?
She protested, she denounced protests that burned flags and were anti-Semitic generally across the board, all categories, in a written statement, which I believe she read in the press just recently. So, yes, she's already done that. I don't know if Doug noticed. She doesn't specifically say on college campuses. She says everywhere. Everywhere. She doesn't see the point of burning flags, and she disagrees, wholeheartedly denounces anti-Semitism anywhere and everywhere. Done. Will Donald Trump denounce anti-Semitism? It's interesting he doesn't bring that up. Okay, so suppose she gives a written memo with White House letterhead and reads it in the media. I guess Doug missed that. Doug must have also missed when Trump had dinner with Nick Fuentes and Kanye West, both of whom were not known for being anything other than anti-Semitic, especially Fuentes.
Number 10. These are questions I would ask if I was alone in a room with Harris and or Trump and shot them with a dart of truth serum.
It already falls apart, because at that point, he's no longer alone with the candidates. He is underneath a pile of Secret Service agents with a lot of broken bones already.
Question number 10.
Hello, Raphael.
This could be for either candidate.
Either candidate.
Will you
Okay.
tell African Americans that they need to take responsibility for fatherless homes? Number 11.
That's the tell, by the way. That's how you know he's being serious. When he impresses even himself. Oh, the truth goes down stingy, burns but smooth, sweet. What does he mean by fatherless? This is an old racist myth propped up by really old studies. I think there was one in like 65 that tried to prop this up. So I don't know where Doug's getting this from. Current statistics do not bear this out. And you have to be kind of careful what you mean by fatherless. Are you talking about fathers that don't live at the house full time? Are they absent from their kid's life entirely? Like, which do you mean? And in recent studies, what they've found that among racial groups, African Americans, the fathers that do live at home with their kids, whether married to their moms or not, or don't live in the same home with their kids, are very active with their children, more so than, say, white dads. And the CDC did that study, I think, back in 2013, something like that. Yeah, exactly. Right. And the mask falls off. Yeah, this is just blatant racism right here. I don't know if he knows this, but like, this is an old pile of crap, racist motif. And he's like, oh, gotcha. No, I mean, you did, but not in the way that you think, because now everybody else is like backing away slowly and, like, okay, I thought I was talking to just a crank, but it turns out he's a racist too. Fun.
Will you commit to fair elections and test it?
Watch this.
Will you task 10,000 non-citizens to vote federally, but illegally, and give them immunity ahead of time and see what percent get away with it? That would be so dangerous.
What?
Can you imagine? This is for both Harris and Trump. Will you commit to fair elections and test it? Give 10,000 non-citizens immunity. Tell them purposely to go vote federally and illegally.
I don't know what that means. Vote federally and illegally. I know what voting illegally means. That would mean, first of all, trying to get registered, even though you don't have citizenship. Then second of all, trying to get to a poll and vote in a federal election. When he's trying to say vote federally, when you vote federally, you vote locally. Your federal election is held locally too. And those local electoral security measures, they test those. Those security measures are in place, whether you're going to vote in a federal election. They're ramped up a little bit more during the federal election than they would be in, say, a midterm election, which is another federal election, or during a local election. But the same basic idea of securing the integrity of the vote, making sure voter fraud doesn't happen, it's the same. Trying to do 10,000 people, where would you do them? 10 in Nebraska, 10 in Washington, 100 in Michigan, 100 in Pennsylvania, 5 in Wyoming, 1,000 in California. Like, what are you hoping to do? Oh, they all got through. Okay. Did they? Well, half of them got registered. Okay. None of them, half of that, a quarter, managed to vote. Okay. None of the ballots counted. Oh, okay. This is an absolutely asinine thing to talk about. Like, if you wanted to ask, are you for electoral integrity, and do you believe in security and protecting the polls and these kinds of things? I think both of them are going to say, well, yeah, sure. Trump is going to say, well, yeah, we can make it even more secure. You can only vote when the polls are open. No more absentee ballots, no more voting from home, none of that crap. All that goes away. Why? Because he's sore about it. So this is just stupid.
And let's see, and we'll track them and see what percent get away with it. Can you imagine if it's like 30, 40, 50, 60, 70%? Like anything above 1 or 2% would be scary.
Where does Doug lean on this? What's it likely to be? What does he think it's likely to be? 20%, 30% can get away with it? And what does that mean? My state has had 100% mail-in voting, and our GOP SOS says fraud is 0.004%. Yeah, exactly. States control election laws. Feds can't offer immunity. Yeah, that's another good point. And most of those security measures are determined locally. Like I said, they're usually tested locally. And if Doug wants to make sure that that kind of stuff was uniform, he should support the idea of public elections, publicly funded elections. Get the private stuff out of there. Don't leave it up to these mom and pop counties, these poor states that are, hamstrung by tight budgets. No. It's federal, public funded. This guy is such an asshole. He can be. He can be. Doug's answer is to have a presidential candidate solicit a felony. Maybe INS should be rethinking the approval of this guy's application for citizenship. I mean, it's crazy, right? Like the fact that he's even said, like, well, they'll vote federally, as if that's somehow different than them voting in, for like a local election. They're going to the same polling place. It's the same place. And like, what would his thing prove? Like, well, 12% of them got away with it. In what state? It was all Texas. Okay. So it turns out Texas has some lax security, or maybe it's Arkansas, or maybe it's Maryland, or something like that. Is that the entire system? No. And which part was vulnerable? Did they get registered? Did they pass a vote? Did they cast a vote? And did that vote get counted? The ballot count. I just don't understand how he's gotten this. Like, well, he hasn't really gotten that far. This is going to be his first federal election. When you vote federally, Doug, keep an eye on how many local people are running the place.
Number 12. This is for both candidates, I guess. Will you tell the American people that it isn't the government's role to validate you or to be your mommy or daddy?
Put a pin in this question for later on. He wants them to admit that it's not the government's role to validate you or be your mommy and daddy.
Question number 13. I guess this is for Harris mostly. Will you tell the American people that white supremacy is not the main problem in the U.S.? And without white men, the tax base would shrivel up.
Okay, so connecting those basically makes the first question like a soft shoe into a racist statement, right? Like, first of all, I want you to acknowledge that white supremacy isn't a big deal. And also, some of these white people, especially these white men that are the basis for the taxes that we take in, the revenue, the lifeblood of the country, they're getting victimized by that. I mean, this is remarkably gross. First of all, they're not. I already talked about this in a previous video. The $2.33 trillion the federal government took in the forms of tax revenue, well over half of that percentage came from corporations. Now, granted, those corporations could be owned and operated by white guys, but as taxpayers, they are separate individuals, separate legal entities. The individual taxes, taxed on you as an individual for your income and earnings and all that other kind of stuff, that's about 48%, but somewhere between 47, 48%, I think. So it's a little less than half. And then somewhere out of that 48% is the proportion of white men. I don't know if Doug's capable of acknowledging, like, we could have a country where white men are, let's say that white earners were 80% of the tax revenue the government drew in, and they were all racists. Is that logically impossible? No. So I don't know why you'd bring this up other than to try to switch the emphasis on white guys are actually the victims here. They're working hard and making that tax money for the government, and they have to every day labor under this bad white guy. You're bad. White supremacy's, it's bad, and it's going to get you. Like, we'll get even with you, white guy. Like, if a white guy is internalizing things like that, he's let's face it, he's probably not real bright.
Truth hurts.
That's not the truth. That's not even a good story. I mean, it doesn't even make a good fantasy. And it is a fantasy.
This is for both candidates, Harris and Trump. Remember, they've been shot with truth serum. They have to tell the truth. Harris and Trump, will you both admit and tell the American people that the COVID stimulus that your administrations both did, partly caused inflation that we see today?
That was for both of them. Would Trump acknowledge it? No, not really. He'd say that he had to. And then Biden made it worse. It wouldn't have been inflationary if Biden hadn't made it worse. He'd just shift that over. Would Harris say that it's probably had something to do with it? She might. She might be willing to, if she's paid attention to it and be like, yeah, if you got supply shocks and you've got, an injection of cash for people, it might be a component of it. But it's not the primary component of it. The primary component of it was you had a pandemic and multiple massive supply shocks in the global economy.
Number 15. This is for both, I guess, Harris and Trump. Will you admit that the COVID vaccine did great harm to many Americans? The vaccine.
They would, again, loaded, he said, admit. 2, what are we admitting to? If you're admitting to the fact that a vaccine can cause an injury, that's stated on the vaccine. That's a fact. They tell you that before you get it. They warn you that this can make you. There can be reactions to this, which is why they usually ask you: have you reacted badly to vaccines before? Have you ever had, or do you have Guillain-Barré? Are you allergic to eggs? These kinds of things.
Remember, they have to answer these questions and not say but at the end. Question.
But not say but at the end. Yeah, because they're going to get so stumped by these questions, as opposed to like squinting hard and being like, wait, what did you say? Like, I heard the other questions about vaccine harm and fatherless homes, but I'm still stuck on the vaginal sex one. Like, I can't let it go. Like, what were you talking about then?
Number 16 for both candidates. Are you willing to put troops on the border and push immigrants so they don't cross the line? Physically push them so they can't cross the border.
This is a policy he wants. Are you willing to do that? So imagine, if you will, a cross between Mussolini and Willy Wonka. That's the kind of border I'm picturing now that's happening inside Baby Herman's head here. So you have a soldier, right? You have your access points, but between those access points and all the gaps, you have soldiers standing shoulder to shoulder, lined up, with nothing to do, except to somehow physically accost someone who is going to pass over an imaginary line into your country. And he wants to know if they'd authorize them to push them away. Why stop there, Doug? I mean, you want American soldiers on the border to physically repel these people with just their arms. Why not go further? And then have to deal with the war that you start. I mean, it could be said, okay, well, you got people that are trying to cross the border. They're from multiple countries, and American soldiers are just eliminating them. They're about to commit a crime. They're gonna cross over, and we're gonna push them back so that they can't ever. So we have a law on the books that says that they can declare amnesty, but they can't ever come in. Even though we have other laws that, like, if you are here and you've declared amnesty, you can stay until you get a court date. So it doesn't matter that our system's completely messed up. Doug's going to be like, we'll fix that later. I want you guys to commit to allowing putting soldiers shoulder to shoulder. That's what I'm assuming. That's how it's going to be. And they have to physically push these people back. So basically, they're on riot patrol 24/7 from what, the Gulf of Mexico to San Diego. Does this sound even remotely feasible as policy? Wouldn't it just be easier to monitor the border and the people that pass through? You observe them, tag them, track them, grab them, process them, send them on their way. This doesn't make sense. Like, Titans, if the vaccine did not harm many Americans, you utter nincompoop. Yeah. I mean, the idea, there's two issues going on there. Can a vaccine cause harm? Yeah. Did it harm a lot of Americans? No, it didn't harm. The number of people really truly harmed by vaccines is generally low. And actually, the Janssen one, I think, was actually the one that had the highest chances of somebody getting like GBS from it. And I think the Pfizer one or the Moderna one, depending on the number of doses that you received, there was a mild increase in your risk for myocarditis. Your risks for either of those things was many times higher if you'd had COVID at least once. And I think your chances of developing those, it went even higher if you've had COVID multiple times. So the idea like, well, are you guys going to admit that you hurt some people? They're trying to save lives. No. That's a stupid question to ask. If you've ever thought, there's no such thing as a stupid question. Don't. Holy right-wing fever dream, Batman. I know. I have been around right-wingers for a very long time. Not recently, other than covering this kind of silliness. But when I was younger and I was a right-winger, I've heard a lot of different theories about how things should be done, and most of them are just crackpot insanity. Especially when you fancy yourself, I used to, a capital L libertarian. But as a capital L libertarian, I believed in free markets and the free flow of goods so much. I didn't believe in a border. A border that's just an offense to a libertarian. That's just big government. And here's Doug, the common sense conservative, advocating for Fortress America. And he's only been an American since February of 2023.
Are you willing to do that? Number 17.
He probably doesn't assume that he is.
Will you choose the best and brightest immigrants?
We assess domestic terrorists pose a persistent and evolving threat of violence and economic harm to the United States. Doug has no clue. No, he doesn't. How does this deal with the 40% that come on a plane or come over on a boat or over? Yeah, he doesn't know what he's talking about. Titan sent me something here. Oh, okay. I don't know if I can, I'll open this, but. Yeah, I might have to ask you later, Titan, how to try to do a raid on that. Doug is the only immigrant I want rid of. Unfortunately, Canada will only trade him for 2 Justin Biebers in the state of their choice. They'll probably take Maine from us. If they were smart, they would just take New York. That'd be funny. That way it's not, yeah.
Would you encourage your administration to choose the best and brightest immigrants? Number 18, for both candidates. Will you stop funding the war in Ukraine?
Oh, I missed that one. Hang on.
Brightest immigrants.
Will you only get the best? I'm pretty sure the immigration system is based on a meritocracy anyway, so I'm not exactly sure what he would change. He seems really concerned about like ding dongs and dum dums coming in. Like I'm kind of wondering if maybe he's tattling on himself a little bit here. But this seems weird. It's like you came through the system. You were a permanent resident. You took the citizenship test. I think he still doesn't understand how elections work. At least I don't think he does. He certainly doesn't understand how a border works. But he's Canadian, and they never really had to worry about one. Sorry, Canada. Yeah.
Number 18 for both candidates. Will you stop funding the war in Ukraine and use the billions of dollars to secure our own borders?
Why is it one or the other? It seems to me there was a bill that was designed to increase funding for border security and to increase the funding for asylum judges. And that was going to happen along with any spending that we were doing to uphold our treaty with Ukraine, Doug. It doesn't have to be we can't spend money on this because we got to spend money on that. We could have spent money on both. But Republicans said no.
Number 19. This is mostly for Harris, I guess. Will you say no to males competing against females in sports? Number 20. Will you say it's okay to discriminate against males who want to use female?
Males competing with females in sports. So does that mean that Trump and Kamala need to outlaw doubles, mixed doubles in tennis, sailing, equestrianship, horse racing, chess? He didn't give any parameters on that. We just don't want any males and females in a thing together. In all sports? Even curling? Come on.
Male bathrooms. Number 21.
Hang on, let me do this. I know it's going to take me a little bit, but let me see. Go into the studio. Let's see. Content. All right. I don't know if it'll let me do that now, though. Unfortunately. Let me see. Ah, yes, it will. All right. Okay. At the bottom, select live redirect. Sorry, folks. I'm doing this in real time. I'm wasting your time. Yeah, I don't see that. Okay, let's see if this will work. Mine looks a little bit. All right, let's give this a shot. Okay, I don't know if that worked, but I added it. So, okay. I will see if that works. And let's see. Thank you for that, Ember. And thanks, Titan, for sending me that link. Let's see. Let me get out of this.
Will you say no to foreign aid to Israel? Not to say you can't sell things to them, but no gifts.
No gifts?
Number 22. This is for both candidates. Will you commit to creating more nuclear power plants in the United States? This is my way as a conservative to saying, hey, clean energy, right?
Okay. There are problems with nuclear power. There is the new one, which is kind of the lower wattage. I think it's like a nuclear, like plutonium salts or something like that. Live broadcasting. I better make a tutorial. This comes up a lot. Yeah, I didn't even know. I mean, I knew that there were ways to kind of like cue into something else, but I guess I always thought you had to kind of like set it up in advance with the person, like kind of kind of doing the mirrors kind of stuff. I'd never done that before.
Number 23. Will you?
Yeah, exactly. No one in the U.S. wants more nuclear power plants, especially conservatives, and it's not clean. Yeah. The problem is that like the new stuff that I've heard about will be extremely expensive to initially set up. Most nuclear power plants are. It's a passive form of nuclear energy. It won't melt down. It won't explode because it doesn't work the same way. But it's a passive salt kind of stuff that's just constantly kind of emanating heat. You still have to worry about getting crapped up. You still have fallout. What you don't have, fortunately, is you don't have nuclear waste. It essentially is its own waste. It's all kind of compiled together, and it's just a slow decay. So you get this slow, steady amount of energy. Whether or not it's going to be really efficient, I don't know. But it can't blow up and do a Chernobyl kind of thing. So that's a plus. And you don't have to transfer the nuclear waste it's got to another facility, which is unfortunately what we have now with the spent rods and shit. That ain't clean. And that cleanup is not cheap. And the amount of oil, the amount of fossil fuels and water that it takes to run some of these existing nuclear power plants, they are not efficient.
You admit we have a spending problem, not a revenue problem when it comes to our budget deficits?
No. I mean, what a budget deficit is just a tool. What's his problem? I want to operate within a balanced budget. Well, then you're insane. Why would you want to? Why do you care about a balanced budget? A budget is just a tool. If you set it up and be like, no, we got to stick to that just because, like, no, you don't. If you're talking about real things like either inflation or a depression or stagflation or things like that, part of the reason why you can go out, you can do things like deficit spending is because there's something more significant going on. You don't just stick your blinders on and go like, well, we can't spend anymore because that's the budget. And nope, I won't do it. Like, I mean, if he thinks that that's how the government should respond to financial issues, he has no business doing anything like that. He'll just be in personal finance, which is fine. Personal finance is like that. You have a piggy bank, you save up your pennies, you put those in there, like, maybe don't put too much on the credit card. Yeah, and it's like we 100% have a revenue problem. Yeah, if you wanted to say like, well, the problem is we're spending too much. Okay. Well, are we really? What are we spending it on? We spend an enormous amount on the military. We spend an enormous amount on things that are wasteful, like tax cuts for corporations, buybacks for corporations to help them, bring their money that they kept offshore to bring it back here because they were scared it was going to get taxed away or some shit like that. Yeah. I think you get big tax write-offs if you have jets and yachts. Those are things that the government's policy decides that it can handle less revenue in exchange for more millionaires and billionaires buying sailboats, yachts, and planes. We have a revenue issue. If you want some of this stuff paid for you, then you need to get that other part of society paying for it, rather than just trying to. Doug's whole thing is like, well, if there are people in need, it's their fault. If there are people benefiting, that's all on them. Like, he doesn't live in a society. He's a lot like Margaret Thatcher.
Number 24. Will you tell the American people that they're too fat?
What?
True serum, remember? Both Trump and Harris have been shot with truth serum.
What possible good would that do?
You tell the American people that in general, there far too many of them are fat.
Why not just have one of them come out and say that there are too many old people here? Oh, right, because fat's your fault. Age you can't do nothing about. Or can
In
you?
other words,
There is that millionaire that's trying to like not die.
will you fat shame?
And will you fat shame? No, they're not going to.
Number 25.
So they're going to violate multiple tenets of anti-discrimination law because they need to tell the truth.
This is more of an open-ended question for both, sincerely, for both candidates.
Did he?
In other words, there far too many of them are fat. In other words, will you fat shame?
But why?
Number 25, shot with truth serum. Will you tell the American people that in general, there far too many of them are fat? In other words, will you fat shame?
Well, thanks to his juke numbers, no. But yes, if you take a look at that waist, yes, he's obese. I mean, Trump will call certain people fat, but he likes to direct that at them legitimately, you know, like in the nastiest terms possible, just to say like all Americans are fat. He's not going to do that. That's going to make him hated. No, he's not going to do that, Doug. A lot of his fans are fat.
Number 25. This is more of an open-ended question for both, sincerely, for both candidates. Would you be willing to abolish the Federal Reserve? If no, why? If yes, why? There's good arguments for both sides.
I don't think either of them would. I think there are good arguments for getting rid of it. Oh, I bet Doug didn't think that was coming out of me. Yes, I think the National Reserve can go. I think there's alternatives, better alternatives for the National Reserve. Mostly because I don't think that a private cabal of banks should be governing that. I think it should be the U.S. Mint. Ask Trump about fat people. The dude which made a banquet at the White House with fast food stuff. Yeah. Well, but see, the thing, he was feeding it to athletes. Those athletes just run it right off. So he wasn't contributing to obesity at all, even though he probably had like 5 of those Big Macs. I've heard Trump is working on it with Ozempic. That might explain why he's looking a little sallow. The face is looking more like a, kind of an emptied out bag.
Number 26.
Burgers.
Do deficits matter to you?
Do deficits matter to you? Yeah, they're in politics. Deficits matter to them. Or are they going to give like the based Cheney thing? Well, we've already learned that deficits don't matter.
If so, why? Make them articulate their answer.
While on truth serum, you want them to burble out an explanation? Why not just ask them to draw you a picture of an elephant?
Oh,
see what you get.
Number 27.
Clearly, he doesn't know how truth serum works.
This is mostly for Harris. Do you agree that people who are married and have children have more at stake than people who don't?
At stake with what?
Stake for the future of our country. Number 28.
Bill Burr made fun of people who were willing to get injections of Ozempic, but were skeptical of COVID vaccinations. Yeah, exactly. Oh, this one just changes the motility of my stomach. Oh, that's fine. I can deal with that. Like, this one protects you from a novel virus. Fuck that. It's probably loaded with it's probably got like a tiny modem in there that'll watch everything I do or say. According to their policies, deficit means less for Trump than for Harris. Exactly. And I've got the proof right here. In fact, let's show that, shall we? Stop screen. All right. Even Trump's alma mater says his economic plan is a disaster. The economic proposals Kamala Harris has backed would add more than $1 trillion to the federal deficit over the next decade, according to a new nonpartisan analysis. Not insignificant. She's planning to do a lot of spending. A lot of politicians will promise big spending first term, or in Trump's case, second term, but like a first, like a do-over. That pales in comparison to the 5.8 trillion increase in the deficit under Donald Trump's proposals, according to a study from his alma mater, Penn Wharton. Not exactly a bastion of left-wing socialist, heterodox economics. The Trump report found that his plan to permanently extend the 2017 tax cuts would add over $4 trillion to deficits over the next 10 years. His proposal to eliminate taxes on Social Security benefits comes with a $1.2 trillion price tag. I agree with that one, though. While his pledge to further reduce corporate taxes would add nearly $6 billion. The Harris analysis showed that her plan to expand the child tax credit, the earned income tax credit, and other tax credits would raise deficits by $2.1 trillion in the coming 10 years. Here's the thing, folks. If you get Harris in there and you get a child tax credit and the earned income tax credit, you will like those tax returns much better. Those will be better tax for a lot of people. The earned income tax credit for me, I don't think kicks in. I think I make too much. Just kidding. And her proposal to create a $25,000 subsidy for all qualifying first-time homebuyers would add $140 billion over a decade. So, yeah, they're both planning to do some spending, but Trump's deficits, he clearly does not give a fat rip about deficits. He wants to get in so that he can't be convicted of anything, and then he'll try and spend some money on some stuff, try to get some people deported. Even though he wasn't as good at it as Obama, and not nearly as good at it as George W. Bush was in his second term. So, do your worst there. Let's see. Let's get back into that video. All right.
This is for Harris, who's been shot with true serum. Do you think you would be the DNC's candidate for president if the people got to vote on it?
If there had been an entire election just with you, would you have been the candidate? Who knows? Jefferson Spanish guy, is Doug even remembering his spending plan of paying soldiers $100,000 per year to stand at the border? And they got to push him back. Remember, he says that they got to be able to push him back. No, he doesn't seem to understand that would probably add to the budget, but he wants to pay for it by not abiding by our longstanding treaty to protect Ukraine. And the way he's going to get around that is he'll help those countries, but only if they pay us. So you can just scrap a treaty and then turn it into a transactional thing. Like, oh, we'll be your mercenaries. Yeah. Are you joking about the 100? He's not joking. It might have been 70K, but he's not joking about that amount of money. It was a really high salary to have soldiers just stand guard. And if they weren't on the border, he also wanted some of them, like a Marine or two, at places like Walgreens and other retail places to protect against national military, to protect against retail theft, so that they can beat up and shoot shoplifters. This guy wanted that. Wouldn't that answer his last question?
As opposed to Gavin Newsom or somebody else.
Here's the thing: if he had stepped down, if Biden had stepped down and said, "I'm not running," and a primary was triggered, she would have had to run in the primary just like anybody else. That's how it works. She would have had something of an incumbent boost because she'd be campaigning while she was vice president. So she would have had a good chance. Yes. But that's just speculation. Would she have guaranteed have won, taken it home all the way? Who knows? Possibly not. I think she would have had a really good chance of doing it. As it stands now, the people that voted for, the 14 million people that voted for Biden and Harris on the ticket, are still at least getting Harris, despite the fact that Biden has stepped down. But guys, there's a lot of right-wingers out there that are saying this is proof that the Democrats don't care about democracy. It's like, you guys don't even understand democracy or like it. So, go huff your own farts.
Number 29. This is for Harris. If Trump wins, Do you think he'll still be in office 5 years from now? Lean yes, lean no.
Yes. If he's still alive, he will do everything he can to stay in. If he leaves, he's legally vulnerable. He will do everything he can to stay in. You'd have to be dumb to think that if that dude makes it, he'll be 83, going on 84. If he makes it a second term, he's not coming out and then going to, and then facing legal stuff for the last years of his life. He's not going to do that. He will try to hold on.
Number 30.
And I would have thought that Doug would have known that, having just passed the citizenship test, that is unconstitutional to have federal, to have military occupying American soil for things like that. But I guess he only got as far as Reagan activated the National Guard to burn down marijuana plants in California once upon a time. So I guess, I can have a jarhead standing guard at the local Walgreens ready to shoot 9-year-olds who steal, suckers and candy bars.
Would you rather the American people be financially dependent or independent, knowing that they would need the government less if financially independent?
If they're financially independent. Well, it sounds better, right?
Would love to see Harris, shot up with truth serum, answer that question.
Why does he think that she would have? I'd be really curious. Do you know who is not interested in somebody being financially sound? Trump. Why would Trump care about people being financially independent? If they're financially dependent on the government, he can do the thing where if the government writes a check, he gets to put his name on that check. So am I talking a fantasy? No, he did this before. He can pretend it's large S directly from his vault of coins. What is Doug smoking in Arizona? I think they have some pretty good stuff there. But he needs to quit taking I don't want to guess. Maybe it's lots of ayahuasca or something. But Fabio is getting into the math right now. Okay, the south border is 3,141 kilometers. In order to push people away, you need one every meter, which is 3 million soldiers. You need 3 shifts at least, so it's minimum 9.5 million soldiers times $100,000. Right? Yeah, well, we've got the money. All we got to do is stop spending money on Ukraine, Fabio. We'll be fine. We'll get it to make money. We'll charge people 2 bits a gander to come down and watch soldiers push refugees away.
Who would you let into the country? Which immigrants would you let in the country?
The problem with doing that, though, is I think Trump will try and avoid legal issues by pardoning himself if elected. Okay, that's true. However, some of the charges that he faces in places like New York and like Georgia, some of those states are convertible, and I think even in New Jersey, those are convertible to state level. So as the president, if he pardons himself, a pardon is the same as an admission of guilt. The federal government can't come after him, but states sure as hell can. He will not want to leave the Oval Office. He won't want to actually physically be there. He hates the White House. He hates physically being inside it. He'll be at Camp Boca Raton or whatever the Mar-a-Lago there. He'll be there for a while. Just sort of living like a villain in a farce, in a Far Cry game.
All else equal. All else equal.
What?
Who would you let into the country? Which immigrants would you let in the country? All else equal. All else equal.
I have a feeling that in Kamala's case, we know she'd probably defer to current immigration standards. If you ask Trump who he won't let in, darker skinned people from quote unquote shithole countries and Muslims. So we already have an answer to that question, at least from the Trump side.
A rich person or a poor person? A healthy person or a mentally ill person? Person who's not a criminal or person who is a criminal? Follow-up question: is there a way to adjudicate this? There is, by getting them through the port of entry.
Okay, getting them through the port of entry is not magically going to solve that problem. The individuals that come in usually come in so that they can take a loophole, which they acknowledge that exists. They declare amnesty at the time they get arrested, and less than 73% of them, 74% of them, they end up getting deported from that process. They're able to stay here for a little while. Most of them have to wait 6 to 7 months before they have the ability to legally work. So they end up working and getting paid under the table by citizens who will never get prosecuted for that because immigration rules are broken and administering them is hard and complicated. And since most of it's designed around reactionary hate to outsiders, it's not known for being consistent or well applied. So whatever he's like, this whole notion, like, well, as long as they come through the borders, then we know exactly who we're getting. No, you don't.
Question number 32. This is for Trump. Trump, you said if Harris wins, taxes will go up 4 times, quadruple. What the heck did you mean?
It'll go up 4 times. Probably the same thing he means by, you know, all the depression that's going to happen and all of the people that are going to come over. We just can't possibly deal with the new people that will come over. Doug seems to believe that the current checkpoints can handle it. As long as the checkpoints know who they are, then only the good people are allowed to pass. We have to make sure those illegal crossers just don't get a chance to come in. Like, okay, the reason the entire situation is broken down there, by and large, is because a lot of the situations that involve things like law enforcement, agriculture, those are broken too. So this idea that what was he commenting on?
What the heck did you mean?
Taxes will go up 4 times. Did you expect nuanced policy points from Trump? He tried to ban people from coming in. He did ban people from coming into the country simply for being of a particular religion, which was tossed out by our courts quicker than shit. And he's going to vote for him again.
Question number 33 for Trump. How exactly are you going to deport millions of illegal immigrants that have come in the past few years?
He will probably take lessons from the 2 presidents prior to him that have been the most successful at it. Obama got deported a little over 3 million people, and George W. Bush in his second term deported over 5 million people. If you count where Biden's at now, Biden has already deported, I think, as many people as Trump has, and that's not counting the number of people that have been automatically turned away because of the Title 42 that was in place until early 2023. If you were to add that on from the time Biden got sworn in, that would be an additional 2 to 3 million people, depending on how you count. I mean, any way you cut it, Trump's a big loser when it comes to, you know, if you're looking for deporter in chief.
As far as I know, Trump's never answered that question.
He's not going to do it, Doug. He's going to be the guy that says they're doing it, and other people are going to have to do the job for him. That's how he works.
Question number 34. This is mostly for Harris.
Of course.
Yeah, it's for Harris. Do you think most billionaires and most millionaires have earned their money honestly and legally? Number 35. The money that these millionaires and billionaires have earned, is that their money or society's? Love to hear Harris answer that. This gets to whether she leans heavy socialist or communist.
Why? If you have people in a country that have the capacity to get that much money, I'm going to say get because earned isn't always the best way to say it. We tend to say things like earning a living, which sort of implies like your life wasn't worth anything until you started striving to not die. But the notion that like your money is somehow independent of your societal obligations, I think is interesting when it comes to talking about wealthy people. We don't talk about the poor that way, and we don't talk about the working class that way. It's perfectly acceptable to shame the poor and the working class and the middle class for what they spend their money on. He wanted to fat shame people, for Christ's sake. What is that? How did they get fat? They made choices in the foods that they eat. So it's their individual choice, right? So they spent poorly. He wants to shame them if they become pregnant against their will. Well, maybe they didn't buy the right products, or the products they bought failed them, or now they want to buy this product and it doesn't work for them. We should just shame them instead. So that we need to do. It's society's business to fat shame people, and it's in fact the executive of the U.S. government's role to tell all of society in general that way too many of them, as a proportion of the population, are fat, and they should be ashamed of that. But we don't ever want a millionaire to feel like his money should be being used for the good of society around him. But Tubby McTubberton is too fat for business class, and he should be kicked off the island. Are you starting to notice a trend here? The kind of autocratic fascism that Doug believes in socialism, but it's a trickle-down kind of socialism. So all the bad stuff happens to the weak people at the bottom and just squirts them out. You can impose all this kind of pressure cooker bullshit on these dumbasses, supposedly, or the wastrels, or the indigent, the great unwashed, whatever you want to call them, as long as they get slushed away so that you can make room for the great overclass. The overclass should never be allowed to feel inconvenienced, ridiculed, diminished, obligated. Obligated to whom? I made an enormous amount of money. I won that money and business. I deserve everything I've got. How dare you tell me that I owe something to these, oxygen thieves and mouth-breathing idiots? But the fat poor person owes Doug their shame. So at this point, I think it's pretty safe to say that Doug, if you're paying attention to what I'm saying and you're tracking it, maybe I'm rambling, Doug is a little bit pathological here. If you believe in this kind of logic, hey, I want to know if Kamala thinks that the money that millionaires and billionaires make is their money and they get to use it the way they want, and it's their right and they deserve it. It's their winnings, blah, 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 blah. It doesn't belong to society in any way. We don't want them to feel obligated. We don't want to blame them. Don't tread on them. Let them just use it whatever way they want. They were obviously cool enough to get all that money. Maybe they'll be cool enough to share it, but don't say the quiet part out loud or they'll take their football and go away. You, by the way, fat ass, can get off my lawn. Next time I see you, you better be 30 pounds heavier or I'm calling the police. Stop spending your money on junk food, idiot. Even though I own a chain of junk food places, because I'm a capitalist and I know what's what. That's how I keep myself in smoothies. This is for psychopaths and hypocrites.
Number 36. Oh. Imagine
He's already proud of this one. This is going to be good.
Harris being shot with true serum and how to tell the truth. Number 36. Was Biden forced out or did he leave willingly?
He can't be forced out. He couldn't be forced out. The only way they could have forced him out of the election would be to propose, Article 25 against him, to say that he's not fit to serve as president, which probably would not have worked. I'm not saying he wasn't pressured. They were definitely talking to him about it, and they were definitely they were influencing. They were all the way over to Obama. They were definitely influencing Biden to step out of the race. Nobody was trying to tell him that he needed to step down as president. That was not a factor of it. One of the concerns that they had, however, was that if his age and his performance does take a turn, so we start seeing more situations like the debate performance happen when he's no longer campaigning, but just in the service of doing full-time presidential work. It'd be very hard to make a case in the second term to not have him removed. And that would be kind of chaotic. Right? Those are just the breaks. I mean, that's just how. I mean, and Republicans would have been savage about it. He would have been incredible. I mean, he was already vulnerable to that. He was the oldest candidate running. He would have been the oldest president elected, and he probably would have won. But he would have been incredibly vulnerable to any of their attacks, even more so, double, triple what he was before. And it probably would have dragged down turnout. And if you think that I'm lying, take a look at the complete turnabout swing in terms of vibe and energy that's already happened from people being aware we got a different choice, even though it's the vice president. She was already on the ticket. She's already in the White House. But just having her there and a new choice of a vice president has already energized the race to the point where Trump looks boring in comparison. I think it was the right call. Was Biden forced out? No, he was encouraged to step down to accomplish what they actually accomplished, and it worked. Aaron, it's abuse on a societal level. Yeah, and a lot of conservative theory is kind of based on that. Why isn't Doug a proponent of abortion if abortion is a way for women to deal with their lack, taking steps to mitigate getting pregnant, and one can capitalize on that failure? It doesn't seem to matter if somebody can capitalize on the failure of others. Like Doug, that's the problem, right? Doug is not going to shame a person who became a billionaire for opening a chain of, of deep fried hot dogs, on every fucking corner in the United States, coast to coast. But he will shame the poor person that eats so much as one of them if they're 20 pounds overweight. You're spending the wrong money. You're spending it on junk food, and you're already fat, Tubby. Get out of here. You're just a no good eater, as the fascists would say. Capitalism is practiced now as the glorification of intraspecies predation. Yeah, and oftentimes it's expressed in very passive aggressive ways. Like you don't so much as like, because it's more like parasitic. You don't actually directly kill and eat the thing. You like carve off a chunk of them and eat it in front of them.
Question number 37 for both candidates.
I got to start doing that more. Ooh, God damn, I impressed myself. Yep, you think Trump would willingly walk away like Biden did? We already know the answer to that question is no. The distinction couldn't be starker. Right. Like, and if he gets in there, if he's goofy now, he gets in there, he's got 4 years of being president. I hope that golf is therapeutic. Because if you think he stammers and stutters and runs off at the mouth, he's going to be even crazier by the time his term is done. And the people, I mean, he's not going to be managing anything. Like the people that are going to be creeping up around that place, the only good thing that could happen from that is that he's so irresponsible, he could probably get a lot of socialists to just show up. They just kind of sneak in somehow. But the whole point of Project 2025 is to make sure that the civil service can never be infiltrated by lefties.
Is there a tax rate above which you would say it's too high? If so,
yep.
What is it?
If you tax people 90% for every dollar earned after $100, that is too high. Did it. Next question. Jesus. It depends on the rate. Right? It depends on the rate. If you believe in, like, what's the percentage on what? The first 10,000 they earn, the first 100,000 they earn, the first 50. What is the rate? Like, what's too high? What's too high? When and where? Oh, don't give me that. You're on sodium pentothal. Answer me now. Do you admit that I'm right? He is really astounded by his own inferred brilliance. He seems to be. I don't know if he has these conversations with himself in the shower and then, ooh, damn, I should have a YouTube channel.
60%, 80%, 35%.
It depends on the context. 99% of the last 1% of the top 1% income, no problem. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Having fun yet? These are uncomfortable questions.
Yeah, but not for the reasons you think. I'd tax windfall profits at 95+%. Yeah.
Question number 38. Oh, my wife's calling. You guys are more important.
Heard it here, folks. I didn't say it. Not
I'll call it back. Don't worry.
Don't worry. I wasn't. Maybe you should be.
Question number 38. Do you support free speech, including hate speech?
No. He does realize that a person can say, I don't support hate speech, but I do believe in the First Amendment. I do believe in the protection of forms of speech that I hate and don't support. I don't have to sign off on it. I don't know what his problem is here. Well, I do know what his problem is here. There's a reading comprehension thing going on or something.
Where are your limits?
Yelling fire in a crowded theater helps, right? That's a pretty good standard right there. Maybe don't incite people to hang your vice president. That'd be a good one.
I want to know where free speech goes too far.
Yes, Fabio. Yeah, if by uncomfortable questions it means mostly stupid and loaded questions, yes, Doug is right. Yeah. How much you want to bet she was calling him and she's just in another room? I don't know why. I do find that funny. Maya says, oh, please, Doug loves hate speech. Yeah. Now he wants to know, like, well, out of the two candidates, who do I vote for? Sorry, I pulled that down. Who do I get rid of? I got to get rid of Harris because Harris is more likely to get rid of the kinds of or police the kinds of speech that I find hilarious. Like, what do we do about these fatherless families? And are you willing to blame African Americans for these fatherless families and the results that, like, dude? I mean, you want some extra starch for your hood and cloak? What the shit, dude? Got some bleach here too in case you got stains you need to remove. God damn. I've heard Doug has his own Ring doorbell for outside his bedroom. It's for outside the studio.
Question number 39. Do you support protection from discrimination based on gender identity?
Here's the thing. If they're going to be a federal appointee, then I believe they're supposed to. I believe that they, as a public servant, attest that they do. So we know Trump doesn't.
I think I know the answer. Harris would say yes. Trump would say no.
Because Trump is an idiot. Why he would admit to that is dumb, but there's no consequences for him, so it's fine.
Question number 40. Will you encourage and praise people who make great choices, good choices? This is mostly for Harris, I think. Harris, would you encourage and praise people for making good choices?
So remember, one of the questions at the beginning was and he really wanted to know if Kamala Harris would do this. She needs to make sure it's not the government's place to validate anyone or to be anyone's mommy or daddy. But you need to congratulate them if they make smart choices. You need to protect and coddle the ones that get rich because they're the money earners. And you need to shame the losers, the people that have fatherless homes, whatever that, we know what that means. One of them's in prison. They're fat, or they needed abortion services, right? Those are things that. So we don't want a government that acts like mommy and daddy, but we do want a president who's paternalistic as hell. I don't know if Doug's capable of understanding the incredible inconsistencies in his. This is from a total lack of a lack of understanding of any kind. I'm not even talking about sophisticated political theory here. The dude his ethic is completely from the hip. These are not thought through. You can't say on one hand, I want to make sure that you understand we don't want a mommy and daddy government. But I do want you as president to tell people who are fat to lose weight. and to call them fatty every time you get a chance, because they need to hear that. They need to stop being fat. And you shaming them, that'll make them feel bad. You know who else is fat? That person over there. Go tell them, mommy, tell them, daddy, tell them they're fat. Also, so-and-so over here studying, you know, they bought a franchise and they're making $150K a year now. They just broke profits. Oh, that was good what you did there. That was real good. Open 2 more. I didn't want a mommy and daddy. Psychos, man. This is psychotic.
Follow-up question.
Oh,
Would you
good.
discourage and shame people who don't?
Oh. Oh. Dead inside. But we don't. The last thing we want is a nanny state. What we want is the harsh governess state.
Question number 41. For Harris, what % responsibility do you take for the broken immigration system in the past 4 years? Is it 10% your fault, 0%, 50%, 70%?
How about 100%, you know, my nuts? I mean, what? There is no way somebody can answer that question and not sound like a dumbass, because the person who asked that question asked a dumbass question. That's a fucking stupid question. To what extent are you, the vice president, responsible for our broken immigration? Seeing as how our immigration system has been broken for generations, I would be willing to go on a limb and say she's 1% responsible, because she's in a position where she can influence it, but she's 99% off the hook because no one's been able to fix it. And when they were this close to being able to do the things that Republicans really felt would fix things, Republicans said no to that too. But Doug wants to know how, to what extent does Harris blame herself for how things have gone? If I were Harris, even under truth serum, she'd probably be like, 0, we had a bill for them, moron. We had a bill that offered up everything that they fucking wanted, and they said no. 0%. They believed in all the little things that in that bill, all that stuff was going to work. And then we threw in some things that we wanted in there. Increased asylum judges in exchange for the fact that the judges had even more authority to deport people for more reasons. And they still said no. Even the stuff that the Democrats wanted usually came with a twist that still favored Republican goals of further militarizing the border and kicking more people out, or somehow finding a way to deny them any kind of even semi-permanent access to citizenship. And they voted against it. To what extent is she responsible for the current immigration problem at this point? 0. The stuff that you want, you could have had. They biffed it for Trump. And Jay's absolutely right here. If you guys know Jesus is Lord or rebuke and reprove, his politics and Doug's politics are about in line. They really are about the same. Hey, Marty, what's going on? Marty, if you joined, you really missed something.
Remember, she has truth serum in her. She has to tell the truth. I would love to know what she would say.
Okay.
So those were my 41 questions. And it looks like we have some other questions in here in the chat. Thanks for the donations, Anglo
That was my most sophisticated critique yet.
Catholic and John. Do you support defending Israel like you do Ukraine?
Fabio did some impressive math on a military border security proposal that Doug had. That's crazy. And I ate a sandwich made entirely of Taylor ham. So that's all. Nothing big. Nothing big. One of those was true.
What in the world? I do not support defending Ukraine with U.S. taxpayer dollars. So what, you got a hidden assumption in there.
Oh, a guy who asked a series of loaded questions, not all of them, but a lot of them, the majority of them were loaded. It's like, oh, you've got a hidden assumption in there. Really? Asking somebody, I admit to.
So my opinion is, I think I'm consistent. I say no free gifts to Ukraine, no free gifts to to Israel. If Ukraine wants our help, they can buy it. If Israel wants our help, they can buy it.
How do conservatives not understand what an effing treaty is? The reason that you support a country like Ukraine is because of geopolitical reasons and interests in the area, not because it directly benefits you in a cash payment like you are a soldier for hire. That is not why we offered any kind of a mutual protection agreement with Ukraine or with Israel. Israel gives us a footing in a very contentious place in the Middle East, and Ukraine gives us a footing. It's basically in a contentious area of Europe because it's potentially up for grabs by either Russian influence or NATO. The dude's got to read. When is Doug starting to sell vitamins and supplements? I mean, the dude froze off what was left of a tumor with compressed air or the refrigerant from it or something, like whatever that. So I don't think he believes in supplements, you know. Maybe he's like castor oil kind of guy.
They need a missile, they can pay. But no.
Yeah, we just sell them out of a basket like baguettes, right, Doug? What the they can just show up and start shopping for like, oh, well, we need 2 F-16s, a couple of,
no freebies.
Tomahawks. No freebies. It's not about a freebie if the country thinks it's getting something for protecting that country, Doug. It's in exchange for influence and a position in a global political power struggle. That's why countries do this. You don't.
John, why do you think atheists overwhelmingly support Kamala over Trump? Because they're progressive. That's why. I don't have good recent polls, but atheists support Biden to Trump 87-13 per Pew Research, April 30 to 24. Doubt it'll change much. Yeah, I've explained this a lot, and thanks for the generous donation of $10. Especially when people are religious, Christian, or whatever, and then they become an atheist, they need to fill the void in their soul and the soul that they don't have, their hearts. They have to find meaning and purpose, and in a lot of ways, they find that meaning and purpose in what I call feel sorry for them, and compassion and empathy for their fellow man. When things get tough for humans, Americans in the United States, and you're a Christian, let's say, you say, Lord, please help me. Please provide for our family. I mean, I lost my job, and I'm not sure how I'm going to make ends meet. But your word says that all things work for the good to those who love Christ. And do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Christians, they rely upon these scriptures so they don't go mentally crazy. Now,
conservatives say a similar prayer to the invisible hand of the market.
How does the atheist do it when they have tough times? They rely on the government so they don't go crazy. And then still a lot of atheists still go crazy.
Rely on the government for what?
I actually think to be an atheist and not go crazy, you have to be financially independent. Otherwise, you'll become a crazy progressive. On average. There's exceptions, of course.
Probably everybody. Like they're all exceptions by the time you get into it. There's more exceptions than rule at that point. I think that's it for the follow-up questions. So I think I can get out of here and send everyone over to the Transpositions Weekly.
JFK has a lot to say about my question number 24. What was my number 24? Was it on the vaccines? No, on the fatness. Yeah. I think the next president of the United States has to look into the camera, look into CNN's camera and says, many of you are far too fat. And you guys are the main reason, you fat people are the main reason why our deficits are so high.
How are fat people a reason deficits are high? I mean, that is, blatantly fascistic at this point, right? It's not the government's position to validate you one way or the other, or to, pat you on the head or any of that shit. We don't need a nanny state. but the government should support people who make good decisions, and it should chide people that make bad decisions, and it should not be afraid to tell people when they're fat, and it should make sure that those people know that they're costing us stuff. If I'm a wealthy individual and I'm super fat because I spend my money on like just chocolate, IVs, he can't say shit about that. But somehow it's his business when somebody who makes what, under $50,000 is chubby. If you can't afford, very few people can afford their own health care. Even Doug, I guarantee you this, Doug cannot afford health care out of pocket. He would have to avoid it. Although in Doug's case, he might be doing exactly that, given the whole spray can thing. But this will be my last point on this, or well, at all. But this just kind of goes to show you, in his mind, if you've made X amount of money, you could probably go and spend it on whatever stupid thing that you want. He doesn't care. That person earned that money. So what if they want to blow up to 600 pounds and die at the age of 45? From a heart full of nougat and hot fudge. Getting hungry. But not for hearts filled with nougat, just the nougat and chocolate. But if they're poor, like he's not going to chide the rich fat guy. He's going to chide the poor fat people. Not just because they're overweight, but because they're an expense. An expense to whom, Doug? The state? I mean, what does this say about you? I think this is a little bit of his Canadian stuff kind of coming out here, because most people are on the hook for a lot of money. We as individuals pay more for, even if you're paying into an ACA health insurance plan or whatever, even if you're paying into like Medicare or Medicaid, you pay a lot of money. We pay individually more money for healthcare than any individual people on the planet, period, on average. And our country's healthcare plan, taken as a whole, is something like 3 or 4 times more expensive than the most expensive one, which is England, which is a national healthcare system and not always that efficient. In fact, I think our country might be more expensive than the next 4 most expensive national healthcare systems and single-payer systems combined. What we spend our money on for that creates deficits and debt is the inefficiencies of private health insurance baked into the system that no one has the guts to do anything about because it reeks of socialism. Even Obama quailed at the idea of doing the public option because he thought if public insurance ends up taking over, these health insurance companies are going to shrivel up on this section of it and they're going to dry up, and there's hundreds of thousands of jobs for people to do these kind of fat totem, workaday things for the inefficiencies of health insurance. They will lose their jobs. And because they didn't have a plan to also spend in to make sure those people would get repositioned into another industry or into other work, or maybe even sent to work for the public agency that's running the new public healthcare option, they just abandoned the entire thing and left the inefficient, bloated, expensive, overpriced, overcharged, underserving system in place. But Doug wants to blame fat people individually. This man, I've said this before, and he's probably going to do a short about this, should not be voting. He is a low information voter and a rube. I don't know what he's been looking at, but he's incredibly, dangerously ignorant about these topics. On top of that, he's a fascist. He is motivated by some truly pernicious, perverse, stupid, ignorant, gobsmackingly vile impulses based mostly on a disgust and hatred of his fellow men. I don't know if it's because he's a psychopath or just an asshole. It is possible that he's both. So with that, I'm going to get out of here. Doug, you need help? Seek therapy. It sounds like you can afford it. When you start paying for it, though, if your insurance covers it, you'll find out that's not a bad deal. The fascinating thing about Doug is that he's not examining reality or current situation. He's divining it according to his presuppositions and stereotypes. Yeah, that's a good point. He's almost totally detached from reality as it is. Yeah. It's not inefficiency. Your healthcare system must make a profit. National health services don't. If those two systems provide the same services, the second one would be cheaper. Yeah, no, that is part of it. That helps the bottom line. But then you add into the fact that on top of the profit portion of it, the way the insurance category of health, the health systems that we have here make money is by an enormous amount of inefficiency. It's, driving up, we have the needs for administrative costs and all this other kind of stuff. If we had a national healthcare system, it was streamlined from coast to coast, wasn't operating on a profit margin, for a profit modem. Exactly. Would it cost a lot initially to set up? Yeah, but it would be a fraction of what these private companies have taken out of the pocket. The vast majority of Americans spend, I think it's 2/3 of their money on the fire section of this economy: finance, insurance, real estate. Those three things eat up an enormous amount of our wealth, and they go to industries that are essentially parasitic entities on the economy. In fact, even I believe it was Adam Smith had a lot of negative things to say about institutions like those three and the way that they would conspire against the public. And yet, despite the fact that conservatives tend to be say they're pro Adam Smith, they've never actually read him. So, thank you for that, Fabio. An assopath. I thought you said he's a kung fu idiot. Stay away from my rights, but you said another thing. All right, folks. Well, with that, I am going to end this. Okay, now that this has been done, I'm going to remove him from that. We'll stop the screen. How do I just end the stream and shoot everybody over to that? I think the link is up. Let's see here. I don't know what else I've got to do. I'm going to post the link to the Transposition Show down here. Yeah, short version, health in the U.S. is a commodity, not something that government tries to provide as a service. And a big thing about that is private interests tend to see any flow of money from taxpayers into a government service to somehow offset that, because sometimes balance out that revenue to expenditure balance. That's a revenue stream they want. So, and they'll never give it up if they don't, if they don't have to. You have to take it from them. So, all right. Well, with that, I guess I'm going to get out of here. Titan, do you know how to actually get this done, or do I just hit end stream? I've got the link in there if anybody wants to go over and raid. I don't know if this automatically does that when I shoot over. Hopefully it does. But I'm going to jump off here. So if that doesn't work, that link is there. Transpositions Weekly is getting started, I think. Actually, they'll be getting in at about 8 p.m. They're starting in just under 20 minutes. So with that, I'm going to get out of here and take a break. And I got a couple things to accomplish, but I'm going to try to get back and jump into the live chat for that. Or if they'll have me on, maybe I'll jump into the panel if they're going to have one. But yeah, with that, I'm going to get out of here. Let's see. It says if you set it up right, we will move when you end the stream. Okay. Well, I think I did. And it only took like 2 or 3 moves and 1 click. So we'll see. Hey, good to see you, John. Thank you for that. Thank you again, Fabio. And I am going to get out of here. I'm going to play off the little video, and I will catch you all later. Take care.